In this video series, we are pleased to introduce some of the writings of Dion Fortune to you. This video is about the 9th chapter, The Use and Abuse of Mind Power, from Practical Occultism in Daily Life, in which Dion Fortune writes about the important ethical aspects and personality development of a mystery student. It also deals with black and white magic, or the left-handed and right-handed paths, and what role money and financial issues play in the mysteries. Brotherhood of the Eternal Light, Teaching the Western Mysteries. Practical Occultism in Daily Life.
Chapter 9: The Use and Abuse of Mind Power. It is by no means simple to find a standard by which to judge the limits of the justifiable use of occult knowledge. There is a borderline of use and abuse of which common sense and common honesty must form the touchstone, but it may be possible to lay down certain rules to help in arriving at a judgment in the individual cases. We can at least hope to find a middle way between the extremes indicated by the advertisements of certain transatlantic organizations upon the one hand, and the doctrine that an initiate may never make use of occult power for his own personal ends upon the other. The more blatant of the get what you want courses in spiritual development are of such a nature that even the advertisements find it difficult to justify them, and one marvels that a sufficient number of sufficiently silly persons can be found to make them pay. One also marvels at the ipse dixit adepts can get people to believe them when they say that their omission to make use of their powers on their own behalf is due to the strictness of their principles. Physician, heal thyself. It is not unreasonable test to impose on our spiritual pastors and masters. The notion that the more spiritual one is, the more poverty-stricken one should be, is derived from the East, as is much of our religious ethics, and because the temperament, physical conditions, and climate of India and Palestine, the chief sources of our spiritual inspirations, are entirely different from our own, some of the accepted precepts are by common consent given no more than lip service, because they prove impractical for men and women of Nordic race in a cold climate. This is not a good thing for the spiritual morale of a race. If it is so generally agreed that certain commandments are so impractical that they can be ignored without incurring social odium, the whole basis of dogmatic morality becomes suspect, and its writ ceases to run outside the inner circle of ascetics. What we need is an ethical standard that shall do justice between man and spur the soul forward on its evolutionary path. Let us realize, first of all, that there are two ways in which esoteric knowledge can be used in order to better ourselves materially. It is possible to influence the minds and wills of our fellow men so that they shall give us what we want. It is also possible to draw directly from the great cosmic reservoirs of undifferentiated force. The former way is the way of black magic. The latter is the way of white magic. An operation, then, passes the first test when it does no harm to any creature. For if it is axiomatic that we have no right to interfere with the free will and responsibility of any soul, even for his own good, save in an emergency, how much less have we the right to try to influence any one of our own good? Jesus said, "I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." This should be the keynote of our operations to secure better material conditions by mental and spiritual means. We should seek the spiritual sources of life and drink therefrom. This we do by means of meditation performed upon the great unmanifest, the source of all being. realizing its infinity, omnipotence, and eternal duration. The source of our being is in this ever outpouring infinite energy. The amount of this energy we receive is limited solely by our capacity for realization. If we can increase our realization and get rid of our inhibitions, we correspondingly increase our intake of cosmic energy, and this energy is transmuted within our being into all the different forms of activity that go to make up human life. If our vital energy goes up, every factor in our nature is quickened and intensified. The artist paints with new power and inspiration. The insight of the scientist is redoubled. The skill and strength of the manual worker are increased. The intelligence and happiness of a child, the beauty and charm of a woman, whatever we are becomes intensified. This, in fact, is the real basis of spiritual healing, the true spiritual healing as distinguished from healing by suggestion. The vis medicatris naturae, which is the only real curative agent, becomes greatly increased, and, thus increased, can often ameliorate and sometimes completely cure conditions that previously resisted it. We must realize, however, that the action of the inpouring cosmic force is not selective. Every aspect of our nature is intensified by its influence. Consequently, whatever is unregenerate comes up immediately in an acute form, and unless we can pass safely through the spiritual crisis that always ensues in some form or another when spiritual power is called down, our last state will be considerably worse than our first. The Christian scientists, who have a wider experience than anyone else of mind healing, call this crisis chemicalization, and always watch out for it in treating their patients, and regard it as a sign that the treatment is proving effectual. If we are working upon right lines, however, the crisis is minimized, for the true line of approach to the source of spiritual power is in the spirit of the words, "Not my will, but thine be done." There are two methods of drawing down this power, the ceremonial one and the meditative one. The ceremonial one should only be used for consecrating the power that has already been contacted by meditative means. It is a method only suited to the advanced worker, who has been disciplined and purified. We need not therefore consider it in these pages, save to warn against its use, as in inexpert hands it can produce disastrous results. The meditative method consists in increasing awareness by means of contemplation of symbols of infinity, eternity, and omnipotence, affirming and reaffirming the perfect harmony of cosmic law, and picturing our own relationship to that which we are contemplating. With increasing realization, there comes increasing vitality, mental capacity, and poise. Upon this basis of increased capacity and poise, all else is built up. If what we need is more money, we will soon find we can earn more because our market value as human beings has gone up. If what we want is work, we shall find little difficulty in obtaining an engagement because everyone we come in contact with will sense unconsciously the vitality and serenity that animates us. If we have life problems to work out, we shall find that increased serenity lessens our reaction to them, and when we cease to react, we cease to stir them up. Our increasing vitality gives us more energy and courage with which to deal with them. Our increased mental capacity gives us increased insight with which to solve them, and one thing leading to another. All things work together for good to them that love God. This is the only right and proper method of using occult power for our own purposes, and it would be difficult to see what ethical objection could be advanced against such use for legitimate ends. For not only does it defraud no man, but increases our spiritual stature and advances us upon the evolutionary path. Our next problem is to consider what are legitimate ends. We may safely say that whatever brings harmony where there is disharmony leads to a legitimate end. This may sound a very simple and satisfactory solution of all our problems. We have merely to make up our minds what we want and go ahead and get it. But it is not quite as simple as all that. What we may need to make us happy is not more money or the love of some particular person, but an entire change of attitude towards life. For if our attitude to life is basically wrong, we shall reverse the process of the Midas touch and turn everything we handle to dross. The only safe thing to do when we want our problems straightened out is to surrender ourselves unreservedly to cosmic law and determine to do the right thing, whatever it costs. When we do this, we come down to bedrock, and whatever is built then stands on a firm foundation. But however much cosmic power we call down, we cannot build an enduring dwelling on foundations of sand. We must never consider expediency when we are working by means of cosmic force. Let us learn to trust in its infinity and omnipotence, and rely upon being able to call down sufficient force to do whatever is needful to bring all things to a just and harmonious conclusion. There is one point that recurs so often in the questions asked by students that it is well to deal with it specifically. How far is it justifiable to use this method for obtaining money? Here again, a great deal must be left to a conscience enlightened by common sense. We may safely say, however, that it is never wise to work for a specific sum of money. By so doing, we limit the whole range and scope of opportunities that might otherwise have been available for us. Supposing, for instance, we worked for £100, which we conceive to be the sum necessary to solve our immediate problems, and having obtained the cosmic contacts, £100 came our way, and it is surprising the exactness with which sums of money can be obtained in this manner, neither more nor less. It might quite well have been that our realization and invocation would have sufficed not merely to get us out of our immediate difficulty, but to change the whole course of our lives. We have got our £100, it is true, but what of the opportunities that were inhibited by the limits we imposed on the operations of infinity? If we have been able to set in motion cosmic power sufficient to produce £100, we have started off a chain of causes that might have led anywhere if we had not checked them at the £100 limit. We are very unwise to outline our askings when we approach the source of all life. Rather should we ask for harmony and increasing fullness of life, and leave it to infinite wisdom to discern our real needs, for needs and wants are not always the same thing. In 9 cases out of 10, a change of heart is needed as well as change of circumstances before harmony can come in, and in a goodly proportion of those cases a change of heart is all that is needed, and the circumstances will do well enough when we approach them properly. We make a fundamental error when we try to obtain happiness by the possession of things. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, which is within us, and all these things that make for happiness shall be added unto us through 1,000 unexpected channels, till they are more than we can ask or think. But as it is obvious that money is the key to so much in this world, and that although the possession of it cannot give us happiness, the lack of it can make it exceedingly difficult for us to be happy, we must squarely face the problem as to how far we may expect fullness of life to express itself in the form of more abundant money. We know well what all the great religious teachers have had to say about money, and how scantily equipped they were with this world's goods. We also know that our Lord said that it was easier for a camel to pass through the key of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. In the face of all this, we are right in regarding money as a legitimate need for which we may use spiritual forces without injuring ourselves spiritually. The key to this problem lies, I think, in the realization that it is the simplicity of life which comes through a realization of what are the essentials and what are the inessentials that is the one thing needful. For the need of this essential simplicity, I believe we may justifiably invoke spiritual aid. This simplicity should include orderliness, seemliness, and beauty, and the recreation that keeps the balance of our natures intact. It should also include scope for the development of our capacities. I cannot conceive, however, that it should include luxury or display, or enable us to put our neighbors in the shade. If we value spiritual things, this will be our natural mode of living, for we shall not want to be distracted by the much care that goes with much cattle. If we have not got the root of spiritual realization in us, we had better leave spiritual power alone, for the first thing it does when it visits us is to burn up the dross in our natures, and if the proportion of dross to pure gold is too high, the consequences may not be all we had hoped for. One must have the right kind of desires before one can safely trust spiritual forces for their fulfillment. In any case, we must always be prepared to offer a greater or lesser change of heart as our contribution to the task.
Violet Mary Firth, also known as Dion Fortune, was an important British occultist, ceremonial magician, and author. The Brotherhood of the Eternal Light is in direct lineage with the tradition of Dion Fortune and recognizes her as a spiritual ancestor. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments. We will create a video to answer your questions after this video series. Would you be interested in us commenting on the writings of Dion Fortune and explaining in more detail her teachings in spiritual philosophy? If so, let us know in the comments. Visit our free online course on Western mysteries and Kabbalah or our live events on these topics. And if you haven't already done so, please like this video and subscribe to the channel.